Good Monday evening, everyone. Welcome to Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. And this is Amy Chen Mills, your radio show and Moment of Truth podcast host. And I am here tonight to help us all make sense of the endless circus of chaos and cruelty that is our nation at the moment. As of today, it looks like we are indeed a nation at war with Iran. And to get an in-depth analysis of the situation, we will be speaking with local author and Middle East expert Stephen Zunes. But first, a conversation with an ordinary working mom in Minnesota, Janine Sieja, about her experience with ICE chaos, abductions, and even murders in her city, becoming an activist, her fears as a mother, and what is happening on the ground there now. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. I believe that Janine Sieja is waiting in the clean feed wings to talk to us. Janine, are you there?
I am. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Janine. It's been a long time. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will explain a little bit how I know Janine. But first, I'm going to introduce her as an ordinary working mom and software developer who lives in the urban heart of the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. She is mother to an adopted child of another skin color and was not an activist before ICE came to town, at least not an in-the-streets activist. Full disclosure, and here's how I know Janine, we were sorority sisters at Northwestern University, and I asked her on the show after seeing her Facebook post about what it was like on the ground in Minneapolis. So welcome so much, Janine, and thanks again.
It's great to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah. I thought I would start by reading just parts of your post. It was a long post. I recommend people go and find it. I shared it. A lot of people shared it. I'm just going to read from the beginning and the very end to introduce the conversation. You wrote, "Hello from still occupied dystopian Minneapolis, where I cycle between anger, grief, and befuddlement. Here are the observations of a city-dwelling, American moderate, liberal, white, Catholic woman a couple of months into what I will charitably call my new normal. My city remains under siege by ICE in the largest immigration enforcement campaign ever carried out by the Department of Homeland Security. My heart is cracked open by the families ripped apart, the humiliating and brutal tactics of ICE agents, the conditions of detention, and of course, the horrific executions of two kind, decent humans." And then you go through a lot of points and experiences that you have gone through there in Minneapolis. ICE's actions aren't about immigration enforcement. They are a flex bordering on fascism, a destruction of norms, a mass violation of human rights, civil rights, and, yes, the Constitution. I can assure you the federal action has not made me safer, freer, happier, or more prosperous. No, ICE has brought me and my family danger, fear, and grief. No matter that none of us is even a stated target of the government, Minnesota has been swept by the most unnatural of disasters, and like a natural disaster, there will be a long trail to recovery. And so I ask, is this the best we can do in America? My answer is surely not. I'm not giving up on decency, kindness, and democracy. End the ICE age now. So I think that was a really powerful piece of writing that you put out. And, I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to really hear what's happening now? But I thought maybe we could start at the beginning, because you told me on the phone that you weren't really an activist to begin with. So maybe you could walk me through how you were thinking and feeling when Trump got elected and then was inaugurated in early 2025, and just sort of what happened when ICE came in.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I would start even before that from the perspective that I would call myself a recovering journalist. I was a editor for much of the early part of my career, and there are definitely times when I miss the platform that I had through journalism. I've always been interested in civics and our society and making things better, but never political, as you say. I think as a journalist, for mainstream media, I was always objective and reporting both sides, editing, from the perspective of both sides. But living here in Minneapolis, over the past few years, and of course, you don't have to go far back to think about George Floyd and what happened in our community at that time, it has just sort of snowballed. For me personally, I like you said at the outset, I am nothing but an average citizen here in Minneapolis, a typical working mom. I have nothing special about me, but you cannot help living here and seeing all of this unfold and just want to, and actually do, step in to help, to bear witness, to speak up, to use whatever voice you have, even if it's just a post on Facebook. I think it's simply what any human in my position would do in 2026. The business about, sort of when Trump came in a year ago and all of that, I mean, honestly, I think that he's doing exactly the kinds of things that he said he would, and I don't think anyone should be surprised. I certainly wasn't surprised early on in the term that things have gone the way they have, but at the same time, what's happened here in 2026 has been kind of shocking, and it is that shock that I think has gotten a lot of people off the sidelines and a lot of people revisiting what they think is their role in a democracy, their role in a community, their role, just their role in society. It's on all of us. No one's coming to save us.
Yeah. Were you at the Medill School of Journalism also?
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you do 4 years there? Because I shifted over to the film school in communications, but did you stay at Medill the 4 years?
I did.
Okay.
I came in believing I wanted to be a newspaper editor, and I left as a newspaper editor.
Well, there you go.
4 years later.
Yeah. Good for you. And then you're also reminding me about George Floyd's killing in Minnesota and the police response and Derek Chauvin and the whole situation which was huge in 2020. I mean, I feel like we're all like bordering exhaustion with everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. And so, but I know that that's relevant, and we'll get to that when we get to the response in Minnesota, because I have heard several times now that the way that people organize themselves on the ground in Minnesota during the Black Lives Matter protests after that killing was really important to the response to the ICE invasion of Minneapolis. So, and I don't know how much you know about it, but we can revisit that. I wanted to start with just you hearing that ICE might be coming, and this thing about voter registration rules, which the media doesn't actually seem to mention that often. Like when ICE first went in, I thought, is this about Tim Walz running for vice president? Mm-hmm. What is this about? Tell us what you saw in terms of why they were coming and, how ICE started to show up there.
Well, it started out, and I have friends and family in other cities where, especially Chicago would be a good example, where ICE had surged. And so you sort of knew what the playbook was and you'd seen it play out. But the scale, the number of agents compared to the population size here was different. And I don't know, it feels like it's partly retribution against our governor. It feels like it has to do with the voter rolls request. It feels like it has to do with the fraud investigations that that are ongoing in the state, but have really nothing to do with immigration per se.
Mm-hmm. Is this about, you mean about the daycare centers and so forth?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So on the surface, there are a lot of explanations for potentially why Minneapolis and St. Paul were targeted. But the reality on the ground was it started out seeming like, okay, it's going to be our turn, just like it was Chicago's turn and other cities. But it very quickly took on this much darker dimension. And suddenly you're hearing about teenagers getting pulled over randomly, profiled for the way they appear, and protesters really being manhandled and not, it felt different pretty quickly. And then, of course, before very long, we had the tragedy with Renee Good. And it's like you just entered a different reality. Like the whole world just sort of flipped around. And I still don't know how to make sense of it, but I'm trying.
Yeah. Like just for you as an ordinary working mom, you're going about your day, you're hearing that ICE is coming, you're thinking, well, I don't know if I'll even see them or not or what. And then did you start bumping it? Like what did you see as you were going to and from work or to and from the grocery store?
Sure. Well, you started to see already neighbors kind of saying, hey, let's get whistles. Hey, let's be alert to this. Let's pay attention to what's going on. You started to see the vehicles moving through the neighborhoods. I started, in my particular situation. So my son was born in Ethiopia and he is 17 years old and does not have a sense of risk or concern or safety. He is a U.S. citizen. That's never been, a question. But within the adoptive community here, you started to hear fear and you started to hear parents talking about, well, what if my child is pulled over by ICE or stopped by ICE and taken into detention? And sure, it might get sorted out later, but is that an experience we would want any of our kids to have? No, of course not. So you started to have this fear and you started having to have these conversations with your kids saying things like, all right, let's role play. Let's pretend I'm an agent and I say something provocative to you or I start questioning you. How are you going to respond? Do you have your passport photo handy on your phone so that you can quickly show that you're a U.S. citizen to try to de-escalate anything that might happen? Like, again, the world is turned upside down as you're thinking this through. You're thinking, what country am I in? What planet am I on that I'm having to have these kinds of conversations? And they're not based in fantasy. They're based in what I'm hearing from my neighbors and what's going on around. So that was kind of the beginning of it, just this awareness of, hey, people are being abducted down the street at the local elementary school, in the school pickup line. People are just being taken and there are troops everywhere. And our kids are traumatized and they're afraid to go to school or to go whatever because something might happen to them. And that is a really big, scary shift in how you live your life. And like you say, going to the store, going to work, moving about, you just feel like you don't recognize any of it. It's all strange.
Wow. We are talking to Janine Sieja, who describes herself as an ordinary working mom in Minneapolis, who has an adopted son who is a different skin color from, where did you say he was from again?
He was born in Ethiopia.
In Ethiopia. And we're talking about what's been happening in Minnesota. You're listening to 89.5, 89.7, and 90.7 FM. K-Squid for the Central Coast in Monterey Bay. Many voices, one station. I want to get back to Minnesota. So then people started to organize. Actually, you're saying that they were sort of, well, what I've heard, I don't know if you've said it yet, but is that people were a little bit pre-organized. People were already on signal chats from the Black Lives Matter protests. And so how did that start to unfold for you, the response from the community?
So I'll speak to my little neighborhood, which is Bryn Mawr, and it is in the heart of Minneapolis. We have a little public elementary school a few blocks away. There's a middle school close to there. We have a little market and a coffee shop and a gas station where Mr. Bavino showed up one day.
Oh, gosh.
and we chased him out. But
you did?
That's an aside. Yes.
Were you there or did you just hear about this?
I just heard about it on Signal and saw the videos.
Oh,
but it's like a block from where I live.
What happened? We have to hear about this.
He was trying to fix a flat and with some of his henchmen, and our neighborhood wasn't having any of it. They didn't want him to use our facility in that way. So that's kind of actually in a microcosm how it felt, that suddenly you have a group of neighbors who are saying, we're not letting this happen in our neighborhood. We're, to the extent that we can, we are not going to allow people to be snatched off the street. We are going to speak up. We are going to use our whistles, use our words, use our signal chat. And you're right, there were some pieces in place from Black Lives Matter and just a strong neighborhood association to begin with. But suddenly you're seeing QR codes going up around our little businesses and saying, get on Signal, do this, do that, know your rights cards, here's how to get involved. And it seemed like from there, people found their lane. They found their way that they felt like they could contribute. Like my next door neighbor would patrol a lot, just get in his car, patrol around, keep an eye on things. He'd be the one more likely to be at the gas station when Bovino rolled in. For me, it continues to be grocery support for those families through the elementary school. So we spun up a system really quickly where some teachers at the school figure out which families need groceries and when. It goes out on chat. Everybody who's like me, who's a volunteer, we just step in on the days that we can do it and say, okay, I'll shop for this family of 6, and I go to the store. I bring all the groceries to the bookstore, which is like the hub of the neighborhood now. And then other volunteers who are teachers come and get the groceries and deliver them so that the families are protected. They're not interacting with random people like me. But I go and buy the food because I want to make sure that these families who are stuck in their homes and afraid to leave, that they're not also worried about what their next meal is going to be. It's a small act on my part, but I think it's important for those families to take one thing off their list of what they're afraid of.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Everyone's got to eat. And that is probably a huge relief for families to know that food is coming, even if they are stuck inside. Okay, I have to circle back to Bovino because I'm trying to imagine, here is this like federal officer, right? Someone from high up within the DHS who's come to lead this whole operation of 3,000 ICE agents and CBP agents, right? And how did people chase him away from the gas station? How did they get him to leave?
Just general harassment,
okay.
Just general. I mean, I there have been so many different forms of protest. It's so interesting. And as you pointed out, I wouldn't have considered myself an activist before all of this, but I have been so inspired. The events that I have attended, the way I've seen people show up, and just the creativity that goes into, how do we make our point? Sometimes it's really large scale. There was a protest in March that had 50,000 people downtown. And, so some of it is really big scale and some of it is just work in the streets, keeping an eye out, chasing people out of your gas station saying, move it along. Let's get out of here. There have been big art installations, and of course, the singing resistance is, as you'll be talking about, is a big piece of it and a really cool part of what people are doing here too. So that's where the positivity comes in. There's so much darkness around this, and it makes me so mad what's happening, and at the same time, there is motivation and inspiration in these groups of neighbors coming together on small scale and large scale and just pulling together in a way that I haven't seen. I just haven't seen it in my experience. It's made me really proud to be part of this community and really want to fight harder to heal and to make things better.
Yeah. People talk about Minneapolis in particular and Minnesota as a state as being I heard someone say on some video somewhere on social media, when I heard they were going to Minneapolis, I thought, well, good luck. And I don't know why, because I mean, I tend to think like every state and every city will say we're strong and we're resilient. And I think it's because we're all strong and resilient. But I wonder if in Minneapolis there is a certain something going on where people are, one, I've heard very accepting of immigrants, two, just really, really resilient, or what? How would you describe the resistance and its culture in particular in Minnesota?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Minnesota does have a strong history and kind of culture of welcoming the refugee, welcoming the asylum seeker. The churches here, across the spectrum, all the churches here historically have had strong programs of hosting, sponsoring, helping people acclimate. There's, a huge Somali community here. There's a very large Hmong community. There are lots of groups who have gravitated here because there's been a climate of support for that. And then I think despite the cold winters, people put down roots here. And, I know my husband, I'm not a native Minnesotan. I grew up outside Chicago, but my husband grew up here and his family's from here. And his family had a refugee family stay with them for a while, and they've remained in touch with that family, decades later. So I think that when you try to mess with that, when you try to mess with something that we perceive as part of our culture as Minnesotans, I think it's just a natural reaction to say, no, we find value in this diversity. We find significance in this idea of immigrants making our country stronger. And you can't come in, like, you can legitimately have immigration policies. Like, that's a whole separate conversation. But that's not what we saw happening here. Coming in and taking away people's dignity, imprisoning people for no reason, with no warrant, with no justification for it. I think it just touched a nerve for everybody here. It was so over the top that I think it was that combination of it was so over the top, and then this culture of welcoming the stranger and caring about your neighbor. Like, it just, those two things coming together created this very strong reaction that,
Yeah. Well, I end up thinking a lot of thoughts while you're talking and wanting to ask you a lot of questions. And then I start losing track because I have so many questions in my mind. But one of the questions I had was so we've seen the worst. We've seen, endless video footage of Renee Good being shot and killed. We've seen endless footage of Alex Preddy being shot and killed in Minneapolis. And my question is, so we're seeing the worst of what ICE is doing. When you're actually encountering ICE agents out on the sidewalks, on the streets, and so forth, it doesn't sound like it feels that scary. And people are like yelling at Bovino to get out of town, that surprises me somehow. So how does it feel to actually encounter them? Are they really young? Are you able to talk to them? Are people able to, talk some sense into them? Or what is that like?
I think it varies a lot by the situation. Obviously when on the scene, when both Renee Good and when Alex Preddy were murdered, those scenarios get tense in a hurry, right? And there's lots of people and there's lots of agents and lots of tear gas and other issues. I think, though, in other encounters, when it's smaller, I've heard lots of people asking, questions like, would your mother be proud of you right now? Or, you can change your mind. It's that sort of, maybe it's a Midwestern kind of curiosity or just quirkiness about it that keeps some of those interactions from being hostile or quite as hostile. I think ultimately a lot of people here are baffled by all of it and really genuinely are trying to get answers. I'm not sure that totally answers your question, but I would say that there's just a broad range, as you would expect. There's a broad range of the kinds of interactions, and some are very scary and very hostile, and others, have a little bit of levity to them. Yeah. I don't know if you saw the video on. Oh, I'm sure it was circulated widely. I saw it on Instagram. I wasn't there, but there was a protest at the Whipple building, which is where they've taken the detainees before they send people off to Texas and wherever else. And that's a horrible thing. Like it's a federal building named for Bishop Whipple, who was a pro-immigrant bishop, Episcopal bishop, and it's now a stupid detention center. Like, you can't make this stuff up. But a lot of the protests are there, and then a lot of the both religious and community groups show up there. And several weeks ago, they had one where they were, I think I can say this, they were throwing dildos at the police cars.
I actually saw that. I saw that. And that was at the detention center, right? Or was it? Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's, oh my gosh. Hey, I'm going to talk about what's happening now, because we've heard that there's been a withdrawal. A lot of ICE agents and CBP and other immigration agents have been withdrawn. But we do have an audio of another woman from Minnesota talking about what it's like now. So we're going to roll that audio, and then we'll be right back with you, Janine.
For those wondering what's going on in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis, and in St. Paul, we are at the point where people are starting to be hidden in other people's homes. I'd been wondering when this would happen, and I was talking to someone on Friday, and they shared that they are doing this and that they know that they're not the only ones. And so I don't share this to spread more fear, but if you're waiting for the bottom to fall out, I think we're really close, and I can feel the eyes on our cities leaving. And I just share this to try to bring them back, because the stakes are so high. And while there might be a narrative that things have gone softer, that it's less hostile, that it's less dangerous, that is not what we are experiencing here. So in my bio, there is a link to a bunch of mutual aid.
Please give them money.
And I don't know, I'm so blown away and inspired by how people are sustaining their level of resistance. But part of that is because we feel the support of people outside of the Twin Cities. So please support us. Don't look away. We need you. We are at the hiding people in our basement part of this.
That was a woman, and actually, I'm sorry, I don't have her Instagram handle in front of me, but I will try to get it during the break so I can tell you where to find that video. A woman from Minneapolis talking about the situation now. We are talking to Janine Sieja, who is an ordinary working mom, a white liberal, she says, a Catholic, who has an adopted child from Ethiopia, and we're talking about what's happening and what happened in Minneapolis, and what's happening now. We're going to get to what's happening now. We're also going to bring in Stephen Zunes to talk about what's happening in Iran. We've been talking to Janine Sieja, an ordinary working mom in Minneapolis, and talking about her experience there. Okay, Janine, I wanted to ask you about the detention center, because that is maybe the darkest part of all of this. What was the name of the detention center again?
Whipple.
Whipple, yes, I've heard that name. And I also heard reports that people who are needing medical care or who have injuries from their arrests, their abductions, were actually being dropped off outside of Whipple, in the woods, with no clothes or very little clothing, without their phones. Tell us about the situation at Whipple and at least what you know about it.
Sure. Yeah, it's grim. There are local legislators who, women, one with a medical background, who have tried to get into Whipple, and they put them off. I think they said they required 7 days notice. When they finally were able to tour the facility, it had clearly been cleaned up. Some of the obvious things had been addressed, but it was still quite grim. Reports of people not getting medicine they need, with the administration saying, "Oh, the quote unquote illegal aliens are having the best healthcare of their lives at this facility," but in reality, that's not the case. And I think like an organ transplant recipient not having the meds that he needs to avoid rejecting the organ, just all kinds of horrible things. And people, just like with the rest of it, the citizens here are stepping up and trying to do what they can. For instance, there's a group, and their name is something Haven, and they just station people at Whipples so that when people are discharged, somebody's there with a burner phone, warm clothes, some basic things that they would need, because you're right, people are getting, like sent out in the middle of the night and they don't have anything. They might not even have their documents, whatever was taken from them when they were put into Whipple in the first place. So it is bad for sure. And people are trying to do what they can to make it better. Obviously, there's tremendous surge of funding for the legal groups here, and trying the best they can to stay on top of the cases and all of that stuff too. But it's a lot. The system is like pushed beyond the breaking point.
Let's go to this woman who we just heard from, also from Minnesota, just before the break, who's saying so we heard that there was withdrawal, but has there really been withdrawal? What's happening? And do people still need, I think, support? I mean, people can't not go to work for months and months. How can we support all these people who have to pay rent, or have to pay their mortgages, and they're not able to get out? What's happening now? Has it settled down? Is it winding down? Is it some, like steady state of mid-level terror? What's happening?
I would characterize it as having been dialed back a notch from the peak, but definitely not continuing to decline. It's more like it leveled off. And what I hear, and of course, I'm just one person and I don't have any special authority, but what I hear is more activity in the suburbs and a little bit less in the city. So sort of moving around, maybe being a little bit less blatant in their activities, but definitely not gone. And definitely, like the recording that you played, I know people who are sheltering families in their homes, and I know of lots of fundraisers for rent and things, like you said, that, it's March and you haven't worked, but you still have to pay your rent. Well, how's that going to happen? Like lots of fundraisers, lots of resources being assembled to try to avoid having people lose their shelter over this.
Yeah. Is there a group that you would recommend donating to?
So I'm telling all my, kind of out of my non-local friends, and I get asked this a lot, I point everybody to a website called standwithminnesota.com. It was created by one or two volunteers at the beginning of this, and it's basically a clearinghouse, and it'll point you to, if you're interested in helping with rent, it'll point you that way. If you're interested in financing some of the legal actions, you can do that. It's kind of blossomed. Unfortunately, it's blossomed out of necessity over the past couple months, but it's a good sort of one-stop shop where you could, find something that interests you and contribute.
Janine, I want to thank you so much for joining us. And I'm asking you to stay on as we join Stephen Zunes, who just got out of class at San Francisco University, who is a Middle East expert. And as soon as we get him on, I will do the full introduction. It might be a little noisy because he was walking from class, I think, to an office or a space. And I also want to mention Singing Resistance Santa Cruz. Reverend Elijah Christopher was going to be joining us. We haven't heard from him yet. And actually from him and them yet. And if you want to check the Center for Spiritual Living website, that group is being started by Reverend Elijah and Heather Houston. And let's go to Stephen Zunes now. Stephen, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, fantastic. I'm just going to introduce you real quick before we start talking about the war with Iran. Stephen Zunes is founder of the Middle Eastern Studies program at University of San Francisco. Okay, I'm sorry, I got those mixed up. And author of Tinderbox, U.S. Middle East Policy and the Roots of Terrorism, as well as several other books and a wide range of articles, including an article for the Progressive, and this was from a past show on what a Harris-Walz administration might have done about the ongoing war in Israel. This is something we talked about in an earlier show. The escalation of the war and the ongoing devastation and mass killing in Gaza. Recognized as one of the country's leading scholars of U.S. Middle East policy and strategic nonviolent action, Professor Zunes serves as senior policy analyst for the Foreign Policy in Focus project of the Institute for Policy Studies and associate editor of Peace Review, and until recently was a contributing editor to Tikkun. Welcome again, Stephen.
Hello.
Hello. I just wanted to mention something before we get started with the questions. I don't know if you live in Santa Cruz, and a lot of people know your name here in town. You're involved in lots of different activities here and talks. I don't know if people know that you're often on national and global news networks.
In fact, the reason I was late leaving is I just got a text from the BBC, which wants me on in about an hour from now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I've been on all three major network affiliates, TV affiliates here in the Bay Area today. So it has been a busy time, to be sure. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and jump in then, because we don't have too much time. I think this is one of the most confusing situations I've ever tried to think about, this war with Iran. We started with a nuclear deal that Obama had structured and set up with Iran that was dismantled by the first Trump administration. All this stuff has been happening with Israel, which we all know about, genocide in Gaza and a war with surrounding countries, and of course, the attack by Hamas, and it's just been a lot. And now people are saying all kinds of stuff about why this is happening. From Israel is making the U.S. do it, to the U.S. is doing it for regime change, to it's going to be the same regime, but we're just going to not. Tell us what you think. Why this war has started.
I think ultimately what it's about is that Iran is the last country that basically defies American hegemony in the region. I mean, yes, they're an awful, reactionary, repressive, corrupt, brutally autocratic government that most Iranians would like to see removed. But that's not the problem. And the U.S. has supported plenty of awful governments around the world. We still do. Trump obviously doesn't care about democracy or human rights or that kind of thing. The problem is that they are an obstacle to this hegemonic vision, that they won't play along, and as a result, they're going to be punished. And I don't think there's any realistic possibility this will lead to regime change. Ayatollah Khamenei was quite old. He was going to be dying in the next year or two anyway. He was in frail health. But increasingly, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard had been playing the leading role. I mean, it's almost as much a military dictatorship as it is a theocracy at this point. And it's not one-man rule where if you get rid of the one bad guy, the democracy can take over. It's a bunch of overlapping, very powerful interests that have a stake in the system, more of an oligarchy, which is much harder to bring down. And of course, when people are bombed, they tend to rally around the flag. Bombing alone can never lead to regime change. So I think, frankly, Trump is just willing to punish the Iranians as much as possible, destroy not just the military infrastructure and the government, much of the civilian infrastructure as well, and basically set an example to the world. If you defy us, if you don't do what we say, this is what we're going to do to you.
You know, I do want to just acknowledge, you know, that all these protesters who were killed by this Iranian government or oligarchy or regime. And, you know, we have an Iranian American city council member, Shebra Kalantari Johnson, who just posted a post on Facebook with the images of all the women who've been killed fighting for their rights in Iran. And so it's hard not to think about, wouldn't something else be better when it's been so terrible, especially for women? And, you know, notwithstanding Trump, we know Trump isn't terribly interested in women's rights. That's not what MAGA is about, certainly. But is there some chance that, like I was reading on a Substack, that maybe there's a deal with some of these people who haven't been killed yet, who've been talking to Jared or to Trump or who the heck ever, to sort of take over the country with the help of the United States and maybe westernize some of it, but certainly not allow for like free and fair elections, for example, but maybe allow women to, you know, wear what they want and so on. Have you heard anything like that?
No, not at all. No, I don't see how any deal like this can be struck. The people in power, like any authoritarian system, want to remain in power. That it's and indeed the nuclear issue is a non-issue as well. I mean, as you mentioned, that we had a deal. Trump eliminated it. The talks are going well. The Omani mediator said that a deal was within reach. And you know, and Trump clearly decided just to go ahead and go to war anyway. It's not about the things we're telling us about. It's not about democracy. It's not about the a nuclear issue. Iran certainly is not a threat to the United States at this time. It's at least a decade before they could develop an ICBM that could hit the United States. This is about control.
And so you don't think that there could be some concessions to sort of a more, I mean, I don't know if West is always the best term to use, but, you know, more freedoms for the population, but not total freedom. You don't think that some kind of a deal is happening, is what you're saying? No,
because again, the United States doesn't care about freedom. And, you know, that, and at this point,
but it would be a win, wouldn't it, for the Trump administration to say, "Hey, look, the women can," you know, it would be something they. And I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I'm going to let you keep talking.
No. I don't. I mean, at this point, I think the Iranians are just ready to bring down the regime. And here's the thing: if you wanted to talk about moderates who could maybe do some significant forms within the system, you think about Mossavi, you know, the guy who lost who actually won the election against Ahmadinejad, but it was stolen from him. He prompted the Green movement, and he's been in house arrest ever since.
Wow.
I mean, a reformer like that. The U.S. tried to kill him too. 2 days ago, there was a direct strike on the residential building where he'd been under house arrest.
Wow.
And apparently an effort to kill him. And there have been other moderates. So the United States is not just attacking the hardliners. They're going after the moderates, the very people who could make that kind of deal you're describing.
Yeah.
Because that's not the goal. The goal is to basically destroy Iran as much as possible. Maybe bring back the Shah's son as an American puppet. I doubt they could do that, but they could try that.
I've seen him on I've seen him on the U.S. news lately.
So yeah, I would like to think something like that might come out of this, but again, it's doubtful. I don't think that's what the United States wants.
And so you've also written, and I think this is important, you post a lot on social media. Your account is public, Stephen Zunes, Zunes. I think you have important things to say. And a lot of people are saying, well, this is a deal with Bibi Netanyahu. We're doing this on behalf of Israel. Maybe there's a deal for Gaza real estate or who knows what. But you're pushing back on that. You're saying this is probably, or you know, it can cross over into anti-Semitism, that the Jews are in charge of everything and that kind of thing. But what is your stance on? I mean, obviously, Israel doesn't want Iran to continue under this current regime. And they would say, and I've heard this from Israelis, like Hezbollah has been funded by Iran, Hamas was funded by Iran, and all these terrible people are funded by Iran. So obviously Israel has an interest in bringing down anyone who would fund all these people from their point of view. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, the Hamas connection is greatly exaggerated, but Hezbollah certainly has been dependent in many respects on Iranian aid. But this actually ties in with your previous question, and that is a truly democratic Iran, where you would have people, or a partially democratic Iran, where people like Mossadegh and the genuine reformist elements were in charge. They're not going to be pro-Israel either. They're not going to be pro-West either. I mean, most Iranians, yes, the American media likes to highlight the minority of folks who want to bring the Shah back. But Iran's been a major regional power for 2,500 years. They don't want to be treated like a banana republic. They are strongly nationalistic. Indeed, part of the staying power of the regime is not its Islamism. It's really pushing this strong nationalist narrative. And for my time in Iran, it's been very, very clear that as much as people despise the Iranian regime, they hate what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians. They hate the kind of pressure and double standards and threats from and now war, from the United States. And so, so the Israelis definitely share the American desire just to simply weaken Iran to whatever extent is possible. But as much as Netanyahu has been pushing for war with Iran, I'm actually going back decades. There's scenes of him in the 1990s saying Iran's just a few months away from building an atomic bomb and that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's on repeat.
Trump is nobody's puppet. Trump would not do something that would, with the high risk of this involved, just because Netanyahu pressured him to do so. Trump has already bombed 7 other countries, and he has this. He's wrapped himself in this kind of imperial model. That again, even though obviously the United States is coordinating very closely with Israel on this, I really do see Israel as a junior partner, and that we would be going to war regardless.
So I was thinking before this interview about Venezuela, and if we weren't in this shock and awe situation in the United States, which has really been engineered to just keep us all constantly, in fight or flight mode here domestically, we would probably still be talking about Venezuela.
Interesting you mentioned Venezuela, because, back in the 1990s, a lot of us were predicting that thanks to the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, the collapse of communism, everything else, that the U.S. would not engage in any more big wars or coup attempts or anything like that, because people have sort of been forced into the global capitalist economy. But I remember thinking at the time, there are 3 countries in the global South that had the amount of oil wealth, that had the, enough water and resources for food and everything like that had a large educated population, et cetera, that could resist this. There are 3 countries, and they were Iraq, Venezuela, and Iran. Wow. And it's no coincidence that these are the countries the United States has targeted.
Wow. Well, we're getting to the top of the hour, and I just wanted to hand the mic back to Janine because, and then back to you, Stephen, and then I'm going to have to start to sign off because I wish we had more. I wish we had another hour or so to talk about this. But Janine was talking about how she sees a connection in terms of constitutionality of anything that this administration is doing. And it just strikes me as so absurd that some of these conservative libertarian types don't think it is absolutely horrific that U.S. citizens and residents now have to have their papers in their car to present to federal authorities just driving around their neighborhoods. Janine, do you want to talk about the constitutional rights that you see have been trampled in Minnesota?
I think in all of these scenarios, the norms, the asking Congress before you invade another country, the carrying your papers in Minneapolis, like these, to me, there is a commonality to all this. And again, this sort of absurdity that is this really the way we're living in 2026 with this administration? And I guess the answer is yes, this is how we're living. But yeah, I do see fundamental, concerns about constitutional rights, democracy, decency across the board. And I've appreciated hearing this dialogue here tonight, because there is that element of, like you said, we're just rolling from one crisis to the next, and the next crises news is drowning out the previous one. And I think that's partially by design, right?
It is,
you can put Epstein in the mix there too. Like, nothing to see here.
Too much to see here. Thank you so much, Janine. And Stephen, do you want to say anything about constitutionality? You have about, I'd say, 1 minute.
Well, certainly, yeah. This is the largest military operation, and almost certainly the longest major military operation the president has initiated without the consent of Congress. I mean, the little invasions, Grenada, Panama, and Venezuela, whatever. I mean, those ended pretty quickly. Those were unconstitutional as well, but they're seemingly quick and easy. This is going to be a long, drawn-out war. I mean, as awful as the Iraq invasion was, as much as it was based on lies, at least Bush had the decency to come to Congress, and he lied enough that he got a majority to authorize it.
Yeah.
Trump didn't even try.
Yeah.
And this is very, very disturbing. This is at least as serious as any of the other authoritarian presidential usurpation of power, violation of the Constitution that we've seen on so many other areas, both foreign and domestic.
Thank you so much, Stephen Zunes, head of the Department of Middle East Studies at University of San Francisco. Thank you, Janine Sieja from Minnesota. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
And folks, I have an announcement to make. It looks like I may be going off air for a bit to embark on a new project in the community, which you will likely hear about if you are paying any attention at all. I love this show. I love you, my audience. I love KSQD and all the podcasts we have produced here, from Starhawk to Malcolm Harris, to Jess Craven, to Kazu Haga, to Angela Davis, to Rainn Wilson, and to Sherry Mitchell, our most popular podcast guest yet, our radio show guest. The Moment of Truth team has produced shows on resilience, spirituality, climate, private equity, housing, labor, and politics. Find all our past podcasts at Apple and Spotify, and at YouTube under the KSQD YouTube channel as Moment of Truth with Amy Chen Mills. It boosts our shows if you like, rate, review, and share them. Visit our Substack, Moment of Truth Dispatch, for more on everything we talk about here, and to follow my ongoing work and projects. Also follow Amy Chen Mills on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks to our entire team, Nyako Nyasu, Mei-Ling Obinata, Todd Zimmerman, Joy Schendeldecker, and Howard Feldstein, and the entire KSQT mostly volunteer team. Our theme song is by Zimmerman of Nativeverse Studios, logo by Kathy Krizik. And remember, if we don't use our democracy, we lose our democracy.